Good day, Crime Talk aficionados. It's Saturday, and that means it's time for the Crime Talk Weekly Recap. But before we get there, this is not just any Saturday. This is September 11th, 2021. 20 years since 9/11 took place, the attack on America. Take a moment, remember the true heroes. Obviously, the first responders, the people on those flights that prevented planes from crashing into the Capitol and the White House, as well as remember everyone that perished in the attacks on 9/11 and at the Pentagon. Take this time to remember and think about it, that although this country has its faults, it is still a great nation, I think one of the best in the world, and we can resolve our disputes, well, without having to turn to violence. All right, next on the docket, the Alex Murdock case. That's right, everything's getting a little weird in the Murdock case for sure. So Alex Murdock, he was the now former prominent South Carolina lawyer whose wife Maggie and son Paul had been found shot to death on their family's hunting property. Now, Paul Murdock was awaiting trial related to a boating accident in 2019 that killed 19-year-old Mallory Beach. Now, the law firm that was founded by Paul Murdock's great-grandfather, Randolph Murdock Sr., said Monday that it had pushed Alex Murdock out after they learned that he allegedly misappropriated millions of dollars from the law firm and told him the allegations about it on Friday. Now, Murdock's former law firm said in a statement that forensic accounting firms had investigated the suspected misappropriation. They had notified the South Carolina bar as well as law enforcement of the findings. The firm itself did not say exactly how much money was missing, but a member of the firm said it was in the, quote, millions of dollars, end quote. Now, Alex Murdock, who's 53, announced Monday that he had resigned the position at the law firm founded by his great-grandfather, and would enter rehab after a long battle that he said had been exacerbated by the murders of his wife and son. Alex Murdock's addiction issues apparently have to do with opioid addiction, which has allegedly done his best to conceal from his partners and family. He's also reportedly become a central focus of multiple ongoing law enforcement inquiries. Alex Murdock released a statement through his attorney, and I'm quoting, quote, "I am immensely sorry to everyone I've hurt, including my family, friends, and colleagues. I ask for prayers as I rehabilitate myself and my relationships." Now, this news all came just one day after getting the news that Alex Murdock was allegedly and mysteriously shot in the head, grazing head wound apparently, on a rural road in Hampton County, South Carolina. It's alleged that about at 1:34 p.m. on Saturday, Alex Murdock called 911 to report that he had been shot on Old Salkehatchie Road near Varnville, South Carolina. Murdock was then airlifted to Parker's Emergency and Trauma Center in Savannah. One of Murdock's attorneys, Jim Griffin, said Murdock was released from the hospital on Monday after treatment for the superficial gunshot wound. According to the Murdock's account of the shooting on Saturday, he had a flat tire while driving to Charleston in his black Mercedes SUV. He apparently stopped to change it while he was working on the vehicle. A truck passed by, turned around, came back. Someone inside opened fire. There's been no arrests and no suspects announced. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this case is getting weird. I told you there was something about this case that didn't seem right. The fact that there were no suspects, and then Alex Murdock gets shot on Saturday with this grazing head wound. Listen, there are cell phone towers all about that area, and the police would be able to see what cell phones were pinging off that area, they would have a suspect. Now, I'm not saying that he inflicted a superficial head wound upon himself. He very well may have been shot. But the whole thing sounds a little suspicious to me, particularly in light of the fact Alex Murdock, who was made out to be this great, highly influential attorney, basically now is being accused of stealing millions of dollars from his law firm. Suddenly, the plot thickens for sure. Now, I get it. If he has an opioid addiction issue, we all hope that he gets better. But guess what? He's probably no longer going to be a highly respected attorney because he's going to lose his license. Not for the opioid abuse. That can happen to anybody as long as he gets treatment, then he'll be fine. But the fact that he allegedly stole, and if it turned out that he did in fact steal the money from the law firm, guess what? He's not going to be a lawyer anymore, and he is probably going to have a felony conviction with a pretty good chance of going to prison with that amount of money being stolen. So the plot thickens. Now we have a whole new realm of potential suspects. We'll see if Alex Murdock basically comes clean with the police and tells them everything that he may know and maybe everyone that he may owe money to, so that the police can properly investigate them to see if they're suspects in the death of his wife and son. The plot thickens, ladies and gentlemen. Stay tuned. There was a status conference for the Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell matters today in court. Yep, the two famous words and the most common used words in the Chad Daybell matter are motion for continuance, and then the most often used words by the court were granted. Okay. First, let's talk about what happened. The court called the case up. They called up both the Chad Daybell and the Lori Vallow matter. They have separate case numbers, and they held a joint hearing. Lori Vallow still not present. She's still at the state hospital, and we'll talk about what happened there in just a second. So the first thing the court did was to go over what took place on August 30th, that they needed a progress report from the state hospital, and the court continued the confinement or the commitment of Lori Vallow to the state hospital. The court has since received a progress report dated September 1st of this year. And, well, the state hospital still believes that she has not been restored to competency, and therefore the case cannot proceed. The court stayed the Lori Vallow matter for another 6 months. However, if there is a progress report and the state hospital believes that Lori Vallow has been restored to competency, that she will then be brought in for a status conference and the case can resume. We will see whether the state hospital truly believes that she's been restored to competency. Then the matter proceeded to take up the issues related to Chad Daybell. Chad Daybell was present in his customary white shirt and tie, along with his attorney, John Pryor. The court brought up the fact that there is a trial date currently set for November 8th of this year, and that there is a motions hearing now set for a change of venue, which is now scheduled for October 6th of this year. The court also noted that a waiver of speedy trial was executed by Chad Daybell, dated August 20th of this year. And based upon that, the court took it upon itself to basically say it seems highly unlikely that we're going to start a trial on November 8th. The prosecutors didn't object to the court's own motion to continue the trial, and neither did Chad Daybell through his counsel. So as of right now, there is no trial date set for Chad Daybell. There's just the motions hearing, which is scheduled for October 6th. That's when the change of venue motion will be heard. There's also been a motion for severance filed by Chad Daybell. This is not surprising to me. I've said this. If you go back and look at videos that we did over a year ago, it was no doubt in my mind that Chad Daybell wants to be completely separate from Lori Vallow in this particular case and have separate trials. Why? Because they're going to be throwing Lori Vallow under the bus. Not a problem right now because she is at the state hospital. But if for some reason she is restored to competency, the district attorneys would then move to join the cases together. Although they're in the same indictment, they're separate cases for court administrative issues. That's why they each have their own case number. Not a big surprise. Mr. Pryor wants his client to go to trial without Lori Vallow. Makes sense. The court is not going to rule on any of those issues until obviously the change of venue hearing, which is set for October 5th and 6th. At that time, they're going to then set a trial date as well as set a deadline for what they refer to as 12B6 motions, where Mr. Pryor wants to file a motion to dismiss, more than likely that there's no probable cause or that there's some defect in the indictment. However, the grand jury transcripts have not been prepared as to date, but apparently they are close to being done. That deadline for that motion will be set on the October 5th and 6th date when they set a new trial date. So basically the word of the day for the hearing was continuance granted. That's all we really have seen to be able to accomplish in this particular case, and the matter was stayed as to Lori Vallow. So, as always, we will bring you the latest news as it relates to the Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell matter. The preliminary hearing has started for Leticia Stout. That's right. She's the woman accused of murdering her stepson, Gannon Stout, back in January of 2020. Well, the hearing's supposed to go today and tomorrow, but guess who decided not to stick around? That's right, Leticia Stout. Remember, Leticia Stout at one point wanted to represent herself at the preliminary hearing. She said in court today that she completely trusts her attorneys and doesn't feel the need to remain in the courtroom. Now, surprisingly, the court allowed her to waive her appearance, her position being that she doesn't want to listen to people say that she is a bad person and that she did these terrible things. The court surprisingly excused her from those proceedings, and the court also said that he will have her appear from the cell tomorrow via video to see if she has changed her mind and whether she wants to appear in person, which is her absolute right to do so. I'm a little surprised the court allowed her to waive her appearance, but stranger things have happened, and this case certainly is one that keeps getting weirder. So, for those who do not recall, Gannon Stout went missing from his home in El Paso County. That's in Colorado Springs, Colorado. The 11-year-old was reported as a runaway, and then on January 27th of 2020, Leticia Stout called the El Paso County Sheriff's Office and reported that Gannon had left their home near Colorado Springs and had never returned. Although the preliminary hearing is not being broadcast, there's updates coming in from people that are sitting in the courtroom. Now, inside the courtroom apparently are Gannon's biological family. Leticia Stout, as we stated, appeared via WebEx briefly, and she waived her right to be there in person. And the DA objected to Leticia Stout not being there because it makes it hard for the witnesses to point to her and say, oh, she's the person that did it, right? They have to be able to show that it is in fact her that is responsible for the death of her stepson, Gannon Stout. Well, the first witness that was called was a deputy, Jason Yoder, who worked at the Santa Rosa County Sheriff's Office when Gannon's body was found in a suitcase under Highway 90 back on March 17th of 2020. I don't want to get into too graphic details, but Deputy Yoder tells the court that he observed the injuries to the body, injuries to the skull, the fact that there were in fact wounds that would be indicative of a gunshot wound, as well as wounds in the left chest and the right back. There were cuts on the hands and arms consistent with defensive wounds. Now, the autopsy report states that there were 18 sharp forced injuries, and the autopsy report also stated that the cause of death was in fact that of a gunshot wound and blunt trauma to the head. Now, the court allowed the deputy to testify, which is kind of expert testimony, but it's a preliminary hearing, that he estimated that the body may have been in the suitcase under the bridge for over a month before the body was recovered. More details to come. Now, certainly, preliminary hearing, the standard is very low, simply that of probable cause. Would a reasonable person believe that Leticia Stout is responsible for the crime? And there's some evidence to point to that. Very low standard of proof. The case is going to get bound over. Interesting to see that Leticia Stout didn't show up. Was this some sort of strategy on her part, or just the mere fact that she doesn't want to sit there and listen to what is being said? Leticia Stout. Now, we're going to give her the presumption of innocence because, well, we do that here in the United States of America. She hasn't been convicted yet, but I think that's coming. Bottom line is, she had a preliminary hearing that has finally taken place. It was scheduled for 2 days, and it took a little over 5 hours. That's the way a preliminary hearing should take place, even on a homicide case. Very straightforward. You put your evidence out there and you move along. But in this particular case, for some unknown reason, the court is not going to announce whether he's going to decide the case and bind it over to go to trial until September 23rd at 9 a.m. Now, I just don't understand this. Is this like the new thing we have to sit and contemplate preliminary hearings? No. The standard in Colorado is very straightforward, okay? The prosecutor has to present some evidence to establish probable cause to each and every element of the offenses charged. It's pretty straightforward. Probable cause is a very low standard. Would a reasonable person believe that a crime was committed and that the defendant had something to do with it? That's it. Doesn't mean somebody's guilty. It just simply means there's enough evidence for the case to go forward. I cannot tell you how many preliminary hearings I have done over the years. I couldn't even tell you how many preliminary hearings I've done for homicide cases over the years. And not once has the judge ever said, I need some time to look at my notes, do anything. That's what trial court judges do. They listen to it, they take copious notes, they rule from the bench. No one's going to get reversed on saying there's enough evidence for the case to go forward. It simply isn't going to happen. Now, the little twist that took place yesterday was that Leticia Stout didn't attend her own preliminary hearing. And apparently there was some confusion where maybe the court thought that she was somehow maybe quarantining, COVID, all that kind of stuff. But then it turns out she really wasn't, but they weren't going to bring her back. And obviously the hearing didn't go into the second day, which was scheduled. I would think the court maybe thinks that he was kind of duped a little bit, that Leticia Stout just didn't want to be there. Well, guess what? You have to be there. And I would not go forward on a preliminary hearing with my client not present. I don't care whatever waiver they say why they don't want to be there. It just doesn't happen. That's a critical stage of the proceedings. They need to be there. I was a little surprised the court allowed that to take place. However, it's his courtroom. We'll see. But what did we find out yesterday? Let's just go over a couple of the highlights. For those of you who are not familiar with this case, Gannon Stout was reported missing as a runaway on January 27th. And at first, Leticia Stout said that he went to play with friends and didn't return. A few days later, the El Paso County Sheriff's Office amended the case to that of a missing and endangered child. And then, according to investigators, Stout was the last person to have seen young Gannon Stout alive. His remains were eventually found later in Florida. Now, we're not going to go into the gruesome details, but let's just say it was not a pleasant death for the young child. It was also revealed that investigators believe that Stout rented a budget van and used a suitcase to move young Gannon's body from Colorado to Pensacola, Florida, which was found on February 1st of 2020. Now, Stout's 17-year-old daughter tagged along on the trip. And then on the morning of February 4th of 2020, Stout allegedly dropped the suitcase with Gannon's body inside off at the Escambia River Bridge and then travel to Orlando and ultimately to South Carolina, where she would later be arrested. There was some video shown in court yesterday from the deputies who first responded in regards to the child's disappearance. A deputy searched the home, including underneath Gannon's bed and inside Stauck's car, but there was no indication that something violent had occurred there in the home. A search warrant was later issued for the home, and investigators found bloodstains throughout the house, specifically Gannon's bedroom and in the garage. A handgun was found on top of a dresser in the master bedroom that Stout slept in. The DNA on the firearm matched Stout. The defense brought up on cross-examination of the witnesses that there were 3 other profiles from the gun that matched men. The prosecutors confirmed that no one besides Stout was in the home at the time of the murder. Now, FBI agent Andrew Cohen told the courtroom that the gun was the murder weapon because they were able to tell that the bullet found in young Gannon's skull came from the same handgun that was found in the bedroom. A photo of that handgun was shown and admitted into court evidence. As the case developed, detectives kept close tabs on Stout's whereabouts after Gannon was reported missing, and using data from Stout's car and cell phone, how many times have we talked about that? Investigators tracked her movements. She allegedly picked up Gannon's father at the Colorado Springs airport on the morning of January 28th of 2020, and the prosecutor's theory is that Stout returned to the airport that evening to move the body north to Palmer Lake. It wasn't until January 31st when she allegedly drove her aunt's rental car with a tracking device unknowingly on it back to the area to pick up the body. She then rented a budget van and transported the body to Florida, where she eventually dumped it off a highway bridge. Now, law enforcement conducted searches in Douglas County off of Perry Road and near Palmer Lake after finding data collected from Stout's car. Search crews found a piece of plywood that had Gannon's blood on it. It was also detailed that law enforcement received several stories as to what happened to young Gannon from Leticia Stout, including allegations of sexual assault, kidnapping, a bike accident, and her initial report of simply failing to return home after visiting a friend. So, although the preliminary hearing is complete, maybe the court just wants to make sure Leticia Stout is in court when he can look her in the eye and say that there is probable cause for the case to go forward. Hopefully, that's what the court intends to do. We'll continue to follow this case. Obviously, we'll give her the presumption of innocence. However, based upon what was presented at a preliminary hearing, it seems to be pretty strong evidence as it relates to Leticia Stout being involved in the death of Gannon Stout. The court will also make a finding that there is proof evident presumption great, and I believe that Miss Leticia Stout will not receive a bond, and she will remain in custody pending trial.